Hello and welcome to another one of Pat's Chats. I'm Patrick Gleason from Out of the Basement. Today I'm joined with Cole Fillion. Is it Fillion or Fillion?
Fillion is
Fillion.
fine.
Yeah,
Either or.
yeah, the art bit. All right. And you are wow. You do voice acting, writing, and all sorts of other stuff. Is that correct? Or is there
Tons of
is there
stuff.
more, like you have a whole lot going on? So I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
Do I introduce you as like a streamer, a video editor, an actor, or
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a lot of different creative stuff. So primarily lately, I've been focusing on a lot of writing and acting.
oh, cool.
So I'm just touching my toes into the voice acting space,
Nice.
which has been interesting.
Yeah. So you didn't start in this though. I see you had a whole bunch of varied careers and jobs before you got to this.
Yes.
Did you always have an interest though in it from like as a kid or as
Oh
a
yeah,
teenager?
yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think probably since I sat down in my mom's lap and played EverQuest. So that dates me. So
That's all right.
yeah, so probably since about that time, I've developed a passion for storytelling
Mm.
in any capacity, really, in the creative space. So
Yeah. Did you do any role playing as a kid as well, and teenager and that, or?
as a teenager, yeah, the closest I came to role playing would probably be stories that I wrote as a child, and
Ah,
then
cool.
I really didn't touch Dungeons and Dragons. This is crazy to me because when I think about it, it's crazy because I was so into that space for so long. Never touched Dungeons and Dragons until I think I was 20, and I
uh,
sat down and played my first game, and I was hooked.
no.
So
Cool. Now, so do you write mostly fantasy speculative fiction, or you're like anything shotgun approach, or?
pretty much whatever comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I've written some short stories that are about grieving the loss of a loved one in today's society,
Mm-hmm.
and everything from that to I'm working on a fantasy epic with another writer. So
Oh, okay. Is there will that be done this year or next year or?
we're hoping to get at least the first chunk of it out next year.
Oh,
But
nice.
prior to that, we're also hunting down a graphic novel artist right now to start putting out some issues for a graphic novel that will run in tandem to that novel.
Nice.
So
Can anyone find you on Amazon for your stuff, or is it nothing out there yet?
there's nothing out there yet. This is a passion project that started probably about 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I've had to pick it up and put it down several times. Such is life.
Yeah, I did.
But
It's, it's just one
yeah,
of those ones.
probably yeah, yeah. So probably I think we want to start. We want to put a focus group together again, and that'll probably be the first introduction to the public. So,
Mhm. And now you also do acting as well. Now
mm.
you're in Calgary, is it? I believe
Yeah, Calgary area. Yeah.
Calgary. Yeah.
So,
What's it like out there to try and make it as an actor? Because I like usually it's like in Canada it's Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal are the big hubs for Canadians really.
I think I got lucky. I chose a good time to start out here. If I started trying 5 years earlier, it would have been good in the sense that I would have had a lot more experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only recently that film and TV has really become popular in Alberta. So,
Oh, good.
so it's pretty good. You can make quite a few auditions happen.
Good.
So,
Is
yeah.
is there anything that we may have seen you in or heard about you from or?
Nothing that's out yet.
Okay.
I've done work on a lot of stuff over the last year and a half, 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went through like a 6 month stale period where there wasn't really a lot going on. There wasn't a lot being filmed.
Yeah.
But I was in The Last of Us, and
Oh, congratulations! Huh?
yeah, that one was fun. I just went out as an extra for that one because I
Yeah.
had to get on the show.
Oh,
Like
of course. Yeah.
I took auditions, but then I had an opportunity to go out as an extra for it, and I had to. Like
Now, were you a zombie extra or are you like a human extra?
militia, yeah.
Militia.
So I
Okay.
was a militia soldier, so it was a lot of fun.
Nice. And
Yeah.
I guess it's a learning experience as you're doing all this sort of stuff, though, right? Or.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's even going out as an extra, because that's what I started doing. That's how I initially got into film and TV was going out as an extra. It teaches you a ton about like the process of making TV and movies. Like I'll never complain about them taking a year and a half to get a season out again. So yeah, that's that was probably the biggest takeaway
All
is
right.
learning the intricacies on set.
Well, can you give us
So
an idea what it was like to be on The Last of Us? I know you're only there as an extra, but can you give us, like,
oh for sure, I chose a great day to be on that show. There was about don't I think there was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 or 400 extras,
wow.
and if you've seen the show, it was filmed in downtown Calgary, and it's a scene where a flare is shot off into the night sky and there are trucks rolling through and it's just crowds of people.
Yeah.
And it was nuts. I don't know the amount of respect I have for the crew working with containing 400 people.
Mm-hmm.
But we show up, we go through wardrobe check. There were so many people and it was very wide shots that they had a group of people set aside that would have their hair and makeup done because they'd have close-ups on those individuals.
Yeah.
But outside of that, they couldn't do makeup and hair for 400 people.
Well, no, that it would
So
it'd never get done doing the makeup then.
yeah, so they basically send out an email beforehand. This is anywhere in the industry. They'll if you're running as background and they're not doing hair and makeup for everybody, then they'll basically send out an email saying the looks that they kind of want you to go for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting. It was nuts. It was a wild night.
Yeah.
So
So since you've been doing the extra stuff, do you like now when you're watching movies, do you pay attention to what the extras are doing in the background to sort of go, hey,
yes,
wait a minute, he's breaking
yes,
character there. That what was that guy
yeah,
doing over there?
yeah. There's it's funny because there's this thing called spiking the camera, and I'm always watching for people spiking the camera.
So what's spiking the
And
camera?
so there are shots where if it's point of view of a character, so it's through their eyes, it
Mm-hmm.
might be okay for if extras are told like you notice this person, then it's okay to look directly at the camera. But otherwise, you
No.
never you pretend the camera doesn't exist.
Right.
So it'll be interesting when I'm watching a show and there's like a crowd of 40 people on screen and you just see one guy's like bug eyes just like locked onto the camera. So you notice things like that I think are a lot of fun. Or what else? There's a funny thing I didn't hear about until I was in a group of people sharing, information in film and TV. But there are instances with different movies where one extra will show up like from 8 different angles on set. So he shouldn't like. There's no continuity
Right. Like,
in that scene because this one guy is
it's just like
walking around the
everywhere.
back. Yes. So and he people that do that, if editors catch it, they don't want that.
No,
But
yes.
it's funny. It's funny to see that because you know that gentleman was given direction by an AD, and so an assistant
Director.
director, and you know that they were given those directions, and so you've got a scene where it's 8 different angles of 2 characters being interviewed, and it looks like this guy's just doing a circle around the 2 characters. So yeah, that's it's been pretty wacky. Some of the things that I've learned about the trade. So
Now,
yeah,
are you thinking still doing the act, or are you trying to do some of the writing? Because you've always been writing, so do you want to try getting into the?
yeah,
I mean, right now you can't because of the Writers Guild strike and everything. But
yeah. That on that note, that is something that is very very necessary to the industry.
oh, it is, yes.
And I think it's good for them. I think anybody that can should support them in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they're doing is very noble, both the Writers Guild
And the
and the
stream,
actors.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, it always goes down to I tell people if you have a well-written movie, that's your basis to build everything upon. If you have a
Mhm.
shitty written movie, it doesn't matter how much money you dump into it.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it is due to the streaming that's happening nowadays because there's
Hmm.
so that's the thing is like you want to try doing some streaming of your own. Like it gives you basically if you could get a camera, you can do your own streaming show. You want to
Oh,
try?
absolutely.
Have you
Yeah.
thought of that for YouTube or stuff like that to try and say, hey, pay attention to Cole. I'm going to do some videos or movies or
Well, I think I have been experimenting with streaming. That's also something else that I've dipped into. But ironically, the space that I've used for recording has flooded twice back to back. So we're actually in a brand new sound booth
oh
that
nice.
I plan to use for auditions, recording,
No.
book narrating, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so I am planning to set up a stream
Mhm.
and start getting back into that because one of the things that I crave in life is interaction with people.
Oh, cool. You don't really like you said a sound like even having a sound area that takes money and time to set up to have a proper one,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, prior to this, the area that I was like what I was recording in before, it was literally I had a sound dampening curtain that
Yeah.
ran behind me and it was hanging from a curtain rod that was just drilled into the roof. And like my dogs would come running in because I'd forget to shut the door
And it's
and they'd just bulldoze the curtain right out of the roof.
mm,
And the thing is, you can, with something like streaming, I think the reason streaming is so fascinating to me, it's one of those things where you, like anyone, can pick it up and to some degree do
mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And depending on your level of commitment and your willingness to entertain, people can always meet new people at the very least.
That's it. Yeah. I think it's more open now, especially internationally, right? Because before
Mm-hmm.
it was like if you're like I said, if you're not in the Toronto area, you're not picking up anything from Toronto,
Correct.
or But now it's like, well, even if you're in Calgary, if what we're doing doesn't require you to be here in person,
Mm-hmm.
you can still do it, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's awesome connecting with somebody like you guys because I after I saw you guys on Facebook, I went back and watched a ton of your guys' content, and I think it is fantastic.
Well, thank you.
But I love the fact that we can be across the country,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's an interaction that feels almost face to
You know,
face.
and that's why we like want to keep doing the live stream of like go to the local stores to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
But then yeah, there's people across. We had one the Canadian Tabletop Championship. We had people in Europe that was watched a bit of it.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's not very much, it's still the fact that they never we never would have connected with them
Mm-hmm.
without streaming.
No,
You know,
absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
and I know there's been collaborative ones for doing shorts and stuff like that for people where it's like, okay, Cole, you record this scene, you
Mm-hmm.
send it to us, we add and then put out a product. Have you tried
Right.
that with other collaborators and stuff? Have you sort of said, hey, guys, let's try a little short web series or something?
I collaborated with a couple people that they're all fresh actors, and they recorded just a short film, if you want to call it that. It was like 3 minutes long, I
Mm-hmm.
think, when it's all said and done. But I did all the editing for the video, and
Long
so
process.
yeah, yeah. And so that's the thing is, I do video editing for YouTube, for TikTok, for like content creators that
Oh,
need help with editing,
yeah.
and it's like that is a career all its own.
Mm-hmm.
That I like doing that stuff from the creative stance of again helping tell stories, but my oh my, the amount of respect again that I have. So when you
Oh,
tell me it might take you a week to get something out, or it could take you longer,
yeah.
I'm not going to complain.
Well, yeah, like people say, "Oh, just fix it in post." Like, okay, yes, if there's a team, if there's a company
Mm-hmm.
behind that, no problem. If
Right,
there's only one or two of you, fixing it in post is not that easy.
right.
It's like, okay, slowly listen, wait, watch. Okay, break it here, do this, and yeah, the fact that you worked on even a 3-minute movie, like I'm sure it took you a long time to do the editing for that because.
They had multiple takes of every scene, and they probably I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 45 minutes of content to watch through and then cut. So it was like, it's not like this where you could put a marker in this, right, where all of a sudden you can clap and then you've got the audio signal
Yes.
that there was something here you needed to edit out, and then you can narrow that time down to 5 minutes.
Hmm.
um couldn't really do that, so it was like marrying up different angles from different takes, and so it's time consuming. And
Hmm.
yeah, that is the thing where people will be like, he didn't really give one of the gentlemen that was the director for that hadn't, like, he wasn't super keen on the music choices. So after we had edited everything, we had to go back in and change the tone.
Oh.
So, and it was fun. It worked out great and it turned out amazing. And I'm glad that he made
Oh.
that call.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. When you heard that,
anytime
you heard that, you're just like, oh.
your chest starts hurting, you're like, this is it.
It's like,
So yeah, it's fun to dabble in, but pretty much everything that the biggest thing I've learned from getting into any of these creative settings, whether it's editing, acting, voice acting, narrating, a lot of it isn't stuff that you can just pick up and run with.
no.
And so it's given me a vast appreciation for the value of any individual's time that spends time in that creative space.
That's good to hear, because yeah, it's like a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into the creative process, and like you
Mhm.
said, even small films, I find sometimes are harder to do because you don't have the huge support of a big large studio, which sometimes
Correct.
can be a bad thing. Yes, I know, but if you're just a small group, you're like, okay, can we get the money? How do we get extras? How do we? And it's also a learning process. If you're on Last of Us, so it was set up for, okay, here's how we take care of the extras, here's the meals and all this. But if you're a
Mhm.
small company, it's like, oh, you're getting extras. Okay, well, are you providing food? Are you providing transportation? Are you
Right.
what are you providing for them to entice them to come? Because if you have an
Right.
extras just standing outside for 5 hours, and you're like, well, okay, it's raining, but do it again.
Yeah. And well, I've been on sets that are like that. I worked on a small project. That was a passion project of, it was the director's passion project. He did the writing, the directing, and he had an amazing team and they had a little bit of funding. Um, but yeah, I've been on that type of project where it's like we don't really have the choice to come back to this scene tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I get that it's like minus 25, minus 30, but like, this is a night shot. This is the clearest weather we've had. It's the clearest weather we're going to have. We
Hmm.
got to get this done.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's even given me appreciation for that because in that moment, you're like, let's face it, as an extra, unless you are a union,
You're
you're
good.
not there for the money.
No.
You're there for the experience.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
at the time, there's a part of me that's like, what am I doing? Like,
Hmm.
why are we standing beside this heater like a bunch of penguins in a tent?
Yeah.
But then now looking back on it, I understand why they made the choices they did.
Hmm.
So
So it's good to have that perspective, I guess. I think it's good for you to start like at the well, not the bottom, but you know what I mean, like start at the lower end to sort of get an
yeah.
appreciation for like, okay. And also now that
Mhm.
you're trying to do your own stuff, you understand too what an extra goes through, and you're like, okay, guys,
Yeah.
I apologize in advance, but we're gonna have to.
Yeah. There's going to be suffering involved.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing is, I've been very lucky. All of the directors and pretty much any crew that I've had the chance to work with so far,
Hmm.
I've been blessed because I've heard horror stories, but every one of these was an adamant professional
Good.
who took their work and the people around them so seriously.
That's very good to
So,
have. Yeah.
and even the extras, like the Wranglers and the crew that involved themselves with extras,
Hmm.
took care of them, went out of their way to make sure that these people were kosher. So,
Well, that helps the experience too. Like you said, otherwise, I've heard tales as well where extras just went, "I'm off," that I can't take this anymore.
mhm.
And then there's always a
Yeah,
horror story of the island of Dr. Moreau, which is like one of the most famous ones out there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's thankfully haven't had to experience anything near to that.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's been a blessing in that way. So
Do you see yourself staying in the Calgary area and continuing in that vein there, or have you thought do
I've started to audition and explore beyond this area. My family is all here, so I would probably continue to reside here.
yeah?
But I have started taking auditions abroad. So yeah, we'll see what
Oh, good
happens.
luck. And how about the voice acting? I know it's a people do it a lot, but what one went from extra to dipping your toe in the voice thing to doing to acting to voice acting.
Again, it was really kind of that umbrella of storytelling. And, I don't necessarily have any interest in um, producing, if you will, like
Yeah.
the back side of that. I like to be hands on, helping
Okay.
tell the story. That's where writing is the passion, entertaining is the
Hmm.
passion, breathing life into characters. And
Yeah.
so I think the voice acting thing came from a place of you hear in animation or like Benedict Cumberbatch as Smog.
Hmm.
Like, oh my lord, like seeing somebody just use their voice to breathe life into an animation.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. So,
I'm gonna bring a point up that though because like since Robin Williams started that whole thing with the genie,
mhm,
now famous actors are being used for animation for voice acting.
mhm,
But I know that hurt a lot of experienced, existing voice actors,
yeah,
and it's sort of do you feel like that the draw for voice actor because of the name should be not as important as someone who can actually like a professional voice actor, because
right,
Burnett Cumberbatch has his voice, he can do different variations, but it's pretty much that's the voice you get.
right.
You
I
know.
think I think there are exceptional individuals that should be respected in both of those spaces, perhaps. Robin Williams is one of them. His catalog of voices he was able to accomplish,
Mhm.
and different characters he was able to bring to life. That is a man who if you look at it from a sports perspective, um,
He's a Michael
it
Jordan
was right. Michael Jordan got into was it basketball and
and
then
baseball.
baseball,
Yep.
yeah. And so if you can you know, if you can play both of those at the highest level,
Yeah.
then that is absolutely admirable. But I think it's definitely a hyper competitive environment, voice acting and acting in general.
Hmm.
And so I think it's one of those things where like you have to really, really stand out as something remarkable in order to be picked up on a consistent basis. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about that's about that.
All right. So when you were growing up as a kid, what were your movie that's influenced you, later on?
Oh, definitely Lord of the Rings. That the books, as far as movies go, yeah, Lord of the Rings is 100% up there.
Hmm.
As far as the animation side of things, Quest for Camelot was something that I loved as a kid, um, along with the Lord of the Rings animated movie.
Yeah, the Ralph Macchio one.
Yeah, I still have that. I still put it on from time to time. I have to go back.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it would definitely be those. Another TV series that fascinated me as a young person was Stargate.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, I mean, Babylon 5. I couldn't. Yeah, I think that's about that.
Yeah.
13th Warrior was another movie that
Oh, and during
definitely.
Antonio Banderas. Yes.
Yes, yeah, that there are lines from that movie I'll remember for the rest of my life. I
Well,
don't know why, but it stuck out to me as
yeah.
a kid.
Lo there, do I see my father? Lo there.
Yes.
Yes, that's the line that still gets to you. I understand. That's one I loved as a and I still watch every once in a while.
I just found my DVD collection
Okay,
sitting right there at the
yeah.
top was that, so I had to pop it in.
And
So,
see, so that narrative style, because I know like in movies you have to have exposition, right?
hmm
And that one worked well because Antonio Banderas as the outsider,
hmm
you could get the exposition without you know being silly, right? Because a lot of times like
yes,
the one trope is, well, you know this story, but well then why are you telling me? Like I like
right,
and that's where it sort of jars for me a little bit as watching a movie is like, as you already know, well then why are you telling the character?
right.
You know,
I
I
completely
understand.
agree with that.
I understand there has to be exposition to get things along, but I always like the movies that try a different way to show the exposition as opposed to
hmm
simply like, so Cole, you did this, so I'm going to explain it again what happened.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's that is a perspective that is a perspective trope that is overused sometimes. I think it's in writing. There is when you finish novel one and you go to novel two, there are some authors that believe a reader shouldn't just pick up number two because they don't know what's going on, and there are
Yeah.
other authors that believe they can spend the first chapter running people back up to speed.
Yes.
And so it's kind of that same thing where it's careful. You got to be careful because that trope where um, you already know, but I'll explain it again.
Yeah. It's like
That is different from the perspective of for those of you that don't already know.
exactly yes, like the time
So
travel or someone who's coming from a different culture or whatever. That makes it easy, right? It's like okay,
yeah,
you don't
it's a
know.
good break in. It's a good break in to avoid that where we can just pretend none of us know.
Hmm.
So
And like I did like the one with the last oh geez no, I just drew a blank. Will Smith one with the zombies. Well, not the zombie ones, but
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend. I like the way they
Yes.
did at the beginning because it's you're seeing the new news shows and then you're seeing the newspaper clippings everywhere
Mm,
that show. So you have to pay attention to what goes on, but that gives you the exposition of what's happened. So he doesn't have to sit there in front of by himself as a camera and go, okay, so journal log blah blah blah. you know.
yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing is if he's already 2 years in, he's not going to be sitting there in his first data entry or in his like 65th data entry going, yeah, the world's ended. Like, I think that's actually it's interesting that you bring that up because if you look at DayZ,
Mhm.
even though sorry, not DayZ, World War Z.
World War Z, yes.
Yeah, I was just watching a video on
Okay,
DayZ a little
okay.
while ago. So World War Z. If you look at World War Z,
Yeah.
they do kind of the same thing where at the very beginning, as they're rolling the credits,
Yes,
you're getting
it's.
like flashes of different information.
Mhm.
I can't recall The Last of Us. I feel like The Last of Us did
I'm trying to remember.
something to that effect too.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting how they give you those bits of information just enough to keep your head above water
Yes.
before any of the action actually kicks off to inform you.
And that goes also to me like I like to treat I like the directors and that treat the audience as if they're smart enough to this up. I hate the
Mhm.
really dumbing downs of stories of like I'm going to explain it to as if you were a 5-year-old child. Like I don't need that. I can pay attention. You know.
Right.
Do you feel the same way for some of those ones? Like.
Absolutely. And I actually, that's something I actively try to do with writing
Mhm.
because I'm sure this is something you would understand in fantasy. I don't know if you do much reading in the fantasy space, but I know that you guys are tabletop players.
Yes.
So it's kind of like if you're writing a saga or you're writing some major epic,
Yeah.
typically that isn't going to be a fantasy reader's first pickup. So, do I need to explain what an elf is,
Yeah.
what a dwarf is, what an orc is, what a do you understand? Like,
Hmm.
you understand. That part is Tolkien did that for us. He did that legwork for us,
Yes.
and then other writers have done that legwork for us.
Hmm.
They've laid a foundation where
If you say
I don't.
elf, you have an idea. Like in your like people in their head, as soon as they say elf,
Right,
they have an image.
right. And so if there are differences, then you can express those differences and educate the reader as to what those differences for your characters are.
Hmm.
But if they're your stereotypical character, they don't. It doesn't really.
Yeah, they don't have to work hard.
I don't need to explain that an orc is 7 feet tall and
And
has fangs and like
mhm.
green skin. Like if that's what I'm writing about, so that part's been interesting because it's a fine line between treating your reader like they are smart enough
Hmm.
and making sure that they have the right information to understand the visuals that you're trying to portray in writing.
Yeah, I agree. There's just for movies, I was gonna say there's one issue where it's like, do not tell me Batman's story again.
Right. Yes.
It's like
Yes.
it's like
Oh Lord.
we do not
It's Uncle Ben. It's Uncle Ben
all
from
over again.
Spider-Man as well.
Yes, it's
Like,
like which I like the Tom Holland ones. They didn't actually do that.
right.
It,
Yes.
because
I
it's
agree.
you know it's so
We've got
ingrained.
it.
We've got it. If someone who's new, who's a young person who doesn't understand it,
Hmm.
there's enough people around that'll say, "Here's why," you know,
Right. Exactly.
and you pick it up, yeah, because there's all the TV, game shows, comics, all this stuff for those characters. That if that one person who's been living somewhere for 30 years that has not heard who Batman is or his story,
Hmm.
it's not a big deal either, right? It's not.
What's the gentleman's name that plays Negan from The Walking Dead?
Oh,
He's an amazing actor, and I always feel terrible because I can never remember his
J-
name.
Jeffrey, isn't it? Oh, I'm doing a quick research right now. Sorry, just I know who you mean because it's Jeffrey.
Yeah, I can't.
Uh,
I always feel terrible because I'll bring him up in conversation, then I can't remember his name.
yeah, as we're both like on the internet now,
Yeah,
it's like
Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan. That's the one. Yes, because I know it was a
The
three
fun.
named one. I'm like Jeffrey,
Yeah,
Jeff. Yeah, I feel bad as well.
he's a brilliant actor,
Hmm.
and I don't think they could have chose better for Negan. But I've strayed from why I brought him up. In one of the Batman films, I can't remember if it was. I think it was the Ben Affleck one. They introduced him briefly as his father.
Yes.
Yes. So and then that scene, you know, that was interesting because that they just crunched it up
Hmm.
fairly well. They literally could just show him turning around, the pistol, and then the pearls.
Yes, that's all you need.
Like you okay, we know Batman's story now. We
Yep.
understand.
Yep.
Like
You don't need to go anywhere else. That's it.
so I liked the approach that they took, but they almost could have just like clipped it down further
Hmm.
because now we're all so familiar.
Yes.
Other and again, it's the same thing with what I said where Tolkien already laid the groundwork for us.
Yeah.
Directors in the past and comic book artists
Have
have laid that foundation where we don't need the Uncle Ben story.
no,
We don't need Bruce Wayne's
no.
parents' story. Like, so it is, and Daredevil is another one too.
Hmm.
That's we get it. Unless you're going to vastly change his origin,
Which you shouldn't.
no.
Yeah.
I think that's rocky. That's rocky ground.
Hmm. Speaking of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, just because it goes ties to um, translating one media to another,
Mm-hmm.
because like he was in The Watchmen, and I thought he did a great job as the
Oh
comedian.
yes,
And I know people got upset at Snyder. I thought he carried the flavor overall of what The Watchmen was into the movie,
yes,
because it's also like, do you not understand that? Okay, it's not just the color pages in The Watchmen that's the thing. It's all the stuff about the books that were written by this other
mm-hmm.
you can't put that into a movie. You need to have a whole 12-hour 12-hour miniseries at least.
Right. And so I think a lot of the time what happens is maybe he approached somebody about doing a miniseries and got
Yeah,
rejected, but he still wanted to put that story out there. And
yeah.
so you craft something with the tools at your disposal.
Mhm.
So I think that movie did not deserve the shootout that it got.
No.
It was I mean Jeffrey D. Morgan in that as a comedian
Oh,
was
perfect.
amazing.
Yeah. And
And yeah, I mean that whole movie was definitely something that
I
was
liked it.
pleasing.
And again, like I know, well, I'm sure you've read the book, the comics, the graphic novel as well.
Yes,
So
yes.
yes, it wasn't the weird alien squid thing that they used, which I had no problem with again
Hmm.
because the basic idea was it was Ozymandias manipulating things to save the world from apocalypse.
Right.
So the fact that he used Doctor Manhattan instead of this weird alien thing, I had no problem with.
I think it worked. I mean, on that, like that exact thing, me and my best friend were actually discussing. We were actually discussing that, but the movie Ready Player One
Yes.
to the book, people were briefed a bit that they made some changes, but if it's done well, such as Mr. Manhattan
Hmm.
versus the I forget
Squid
what it's
thing.
called.
Yeah. It was a weird squid.
If
The
it's done well, I don't see any problem with it.
no.
Why? Because you get two variations of a wonderful story.
Hmm.
Ready Player One, the book. I don't know if you've read it.
Yes.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I'm on the fence about the sequel,
Okay.
but
Yeah. The movie
it,
was I didn't mind it. It just for me was too much nostalgia plugging of like and we're putting our IP
mhm,
in everywhere. It's like here's
yeah,
our we have these.
I did like that they did a good job of showing that the Oasis has like consumed all media.
Hmm.
So I did appreciate that, seeing, Spartans running beside DC characters
Yes.
and like seeing all of that on screen was fantastic. But I think the stories overall each stood up in their own way.
Hmm.
So I don't see small changes like that or, you know, decisions to change an entire couple of chapters when
Yeah.
you translate it to a movie as a bad thing if it's
Or
done well.
or make a 6'4" Australian a 5'4" Canadian superhero. Say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, so he
and
he I'm going to be interested to see who, if ever, replaces him.
no, exactly. And like I said, I don't mind if there's a little bit a slight change as long as the overall story or the theme behind
Feeling,
it
yeah,
is still there. Because again, it's different media. It's not. I mean, there's also a reason they don't wear spandex in the movies
right.
because it just doesn't. It just doesn't work. It works okay for
Oh,
it works okay when you're drawing it.
yes, it works okay when you're drawing it. There's certain scenes
It
that
just
would have vastly changed
oh
if
yes,
everybody had been wearing spandex.
yes.
So,
It's like get
as far
get an
as
R rating right away for some of the moves. It's like okay, yeah, we can.
right, so as far as that goes, I'm glad about those decisions to change that.
Yeah.
I think they were smart in doing that. Yes, our rating would have
it's,
been. Oh Lord, I could just see them
it's like,
walking in.
oh yeah, it's like I can see an outline. I don't. Why am I seeing an outline? I shouldn't see.
Yeah, exactly.
like,
Oh Lord.
like,
So as far as decisions like that go, it's probably
yeah.
probably smart.
And again, like I said, it's from any medium, even from going from a movie to a book, is also
Hmm.
hard because you have to work with the creators in that to understand. Like, so it was a 2 hour movie. Well, in a novel, that's not a very long novel. Like
No, that really isn't
and people don't understand. It's like for a 2 hour movie into a novel, maybe a couple hundred pages at the most.
right.
But
Yeah, I mean, Forgotten Realms is a prime example. Like those, each one of those books would make a good movie.
yes,
Like if you've read The Legend of Drizzt,
yes.
they're all
Oh,
the perfect size.
I had them when I was a kid. I had all the Dragonlance series, the ones from Kryn and the Minotaurs and all that. So I had,
Yeah.
but yeah, right. Like one book is a movie, and this is where I imagine you've seen this when you're looking at movies. Like, okay, we're taking a huge omnibus and
Mm-hmm.
trying to make one movie out of it. Like that's what they used to
Ugh.
do. That's what they used to do back in the '80s. And that is like, okay, we'll just shove
Yeah.
all these things together. The first Dune,
Mm-hmm.
I still has a thing for me, but it's like, okay, you're trying to combine two books with a lot of stuff in there,
Yeah.
and
What did you think of the new one?
I really loved it. Uh,
Oh yeah.
and I know some people are like, well, it's not as much action. It's like, have you read the books? Like,
The thing is, those are really good books, but they are very stale
well,
at certain points.
that's just it. It's like it's all the political maneuvering and stuff that's going
Mhm.
on, and the background stuff. So there's
It's
very
action of its own
it is.
if you pay attention to
But
that
I
kind of
think
stuff.
they did a smart Villeneuve did a good job of like, okay, we're gonna break it up into more than one movie, just because there's so
Mhm.
much in the first book alone. There's so much that goes on,
Yeah, I
and
completely agree.
so and also the stunning. Well, I mean, modern times, better CGI and everything,
Mhm.
but the cinematography was just beautiful in that.
Oh yes,
And,
yeah. That's actually something that does a lot for me with different shows.
mhm,
Is if the cinematography and the feeling or the emotion in any given scene is done well,
mhm.
that will carry a lot of the show for me.
Yeah. Well, did you see Blade Runner 2049?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I wish it had done better in the theaters because that was another beautiful film that
It
captured
was
the world and everything.
it was so good to look at.
Hmm.
I mean, this is a hot topic, but the Rings of Power series
Hmm.
has its flaws. 100% does,
Yeah.
as most things now do.
Hmm.
But um,
Beautiful to look at.
it was stunning to look at.
Yeah.
Like the shots that they took and like the CGI that they did for different scenes was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was in the vein with Lord of the Rings to look at, like physically to
Hmm.
look at. A lot of it was right up there with Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
for me.
And also, I guess because you've worked on a couple, just well, a whole bunch of things, music with the choreography and the story is very important as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I think if you watch pretty much any movie or TV show or even cartoons now,
Hmm.
silence is typically very intentional. There is almost always some form of music, or even if it's just like one odd piano key
Yeah.
every 6 seconds, there will always be some form of sound in the background. That I feel like is what transports you into the scene more than anything.
And
Your audio cues are
mhm.
so important.
But also I agree with you. When they hit that silence, then that's like it grabs you because all of a sudden there's nothing else but the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's been some pretty powerful scenes in television and movies where the music that is has been there the entire series cuts out,
Mm.
or it fades to white noise, but then you realize the second it's gone, and then
Oh
you're
yeah.
locked in.
Yes. Because now
So
you're paying attention, like something's happening, or this is like a really important scene because there's nothing else to it. But
absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
how do you feel about adding modern music to movies and stuff like that? Because I know there's different sayings like, well, you want something that's popular so people know it when they see the scene, but then there's ones
Mm-hmm.
like, well, do your own score. Um, and this is where Clint Eastwood, I mean, personal issues aside for nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
he went from okay actor, director, then he started doing his own music scores for his own movies,
Right.
and
He that's another guy that back to like voice actor to actor kind of
yes,
thing. That is a guy who crushed it as an actor and then went and became a stunning director.
hmm,
Mel Gibson is very much the same in that regard.
yeah,
Some of the stuff he's directed lately has been outstanding,
yes,
generational for sure. Um, so it doesn't surprise me that Clint Eastwood is going to try and put another thing under his belt and do it, have success with it.
hmm,
So scoring your own music, that is, I can put a couple sounds together, and like it's fascinating to me when it works.
yes,
But like, or getting I've done some audio editing and video editing for some Call of Duty content creators,
oh, cool, nice,
and
yeah,
it's always fun to me to try and find music that marries up with the gunshots in any given scene.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that in media a couple of times,
Yes.
and that's something that stayed with me. Is like that was always super cool.
Yeah. Do you ever see the movie Kick Ass? Kick Ass. Sorry, Kick
Kick
Ass.
ass, yeah.
Where at the scene where they have Joan Jett's song there playing when Kid Girl's going through some of the people,
Yes.
and I was like,
Yes.
see, to me that's the perfect combination of media's working together.
Mm.
But there's also times even in big budget movies where you're like the score or the music is sort of like that jars with the feeling.
I feel like if they had tried to put some popular modern music into Dune, it
Yeah.
would have completely been off basis.
Oh God, yes, it just.
But what's his Guy Ritchie?
Yes.
Guy Ritchie. He can take a medieval movie.
Oh, I know.
And he can throw AC/DC in there, and if it's at the right spot in the movie, it will absolutely kill.
Well, it's that Heath Ledger one where they started playing "We Will Rock You."
Oh yeah, Knight's Tale.
Knight's Tale.
Yeah.
And it worked because it's not you're not supposed to take this movie seriously. It's not a historical epic. It's
it's a fun, entertaining movie.
Yeah. And that's just it. It's like you got to understand also the genre and the theme that the movie's going for, right? Yes, had they tried to do the Excalibur thing, that's different. Then you want the orchestral stuff. But they were trying for a more lighthearted, romantic comedy set in that time period.
Right, and that's the thing is, I think if in either modern music and television versus scoring your own soundtrack, it's very hit or miss. Like it is you can either completely miss the mark or you can land it. And if you land it, it is so well done. I just looked it up because I couldn't remember the name, but I can hear the lyrics. Paint It Black by Rolling Stones.
Yes.
Has been used. And
so many times.
They'll slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
And like they'll have a woman sing it in like a very like ghostly choir pitch, and then they'll use that where like you'll see a dude like dragging somebody and a sword, and that can, even though it's in a medieval field, the way it's been scored for that production, that is like that's a diamond in the rough.
It is. And there's but again, there's also like if you hear "Fortunate Son," you get the feeling of Vietnam.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Even if it's in a futuristic movie, as soon as you hear that, you're like, okay, it's a Vietnam, it's a war issue. Like this is going to be something going on with that, right? It's.
So let's play a little game, me and you then. So Fortunate Son, love that, and I love that you chose that because that is 100%. Anytime you see a fleet of helicopters, you're like, oh, you can hear it already.
Yes.
That almost replaces Flight of the Valkyrie for me. With like the helicopters.
Yes.
So is there a movie where we have a similar scene that you can think of that it would have fit well in modern time?
The music, you mean?
Yeah. There is a movie, like for me it would be Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that would work. I'm trying to remember, like there's so many I've watched. I'm going to say actually I think even Fortunate Son, even Baby Driver, I think would work in a couple scenes where he's driving.
Oh yeah.
Just because
definitely. That's a really good choice. I like that.
Yeah, because I watched it recently again and was like, oh yeah, the choice of music. I was like, actually, I could see a Fortunate Son one playing at certain scenes. Just now that I'm thinking about it, yeah. But it's
an interesting concept to do that.
Yeah.
That's always like fun to direct in your head, like dabble in your head with like, oh, this is a song I would pair up with this scene.
Yeah, Bad to the Bone in T2.
Yes.
That bump, and you're like, it fits so well. But I could see other scenes, like even a Rocky movie sometimes, in the third one where Mr. T's character was,
yes,
if he was in the gym, Bad to the Bone could place in certain cases.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
there was one more I was going to mention. There's been a trend on TikTok, or not a trend. There's been I don't know if it's one guy that's doing it or if it's multiple content creators that are doing it, but they're fabulous either way. But it's proof that this song works with any scene.
Okay.
And they've been using Hero by Nickelback
Oh, yeah, which
for like every action scene.
I was gonna say that's one of the ones that sort of after a while you felt it was a little overplayed, but it does work,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's still there's a reason they
So
still use it.
yes, because every single scene this guy has chosen from any action sequence,
Works.
you if you were to mute it and play it over while it's going, it works.
Yeah.
There's just certain songs like Painted Black or
Well, and
Hero.
from the role playing perspective, when I'm playing with my players, anytime I want to show some sort of between two or three people to showdown, it's
Mm-hmm.
Sergio Leone's or Enrique Mansuro's or Enrique Manchuri. I can't pronounce his last name. I just,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. From the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And as soon as that, I just have to start playing it, and the players know that okay, now we're getting into a showdown period.
Right.
Right?
And that's like that's your boss music.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
your
This
combat music.
this comes in, and that's one thing I found. I don't know if you've ever for the role playing. Music does help some set the scenes. Like I don't want to have it playing all the time, but there's
Mm-hmm.
certain scenes where you're like, okay, I really want to put forth that this is the danger scene or this is the boss scene, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where yeah, music evokes so much in it, which is why it's important for movies to have the right combination of music to scene.
Right. And so, not to plug anything,
Oh no, plug
but
away. This is what it's all about. It's plug away.
Sirenscape. Have you dabbled with that at all?
No, unfortunately, no, I haven't.
It's brilliant. You should check it out.
Sirens
I've
Gate.
actually Sirenscape, I believe it's
Sirens.
called.
Okay.
Yeah, Sirenscape. Syrinscape.
Okay.
But they have, and this is brilliant for anybody that watches your channel to know about if they're trying to DM or they think this is something that their DM would use.
Yeah.
But it's basically a soundboard.
Oh yeah, there it is.
And there's different
Oh.
packs that you can get, and there's different background music. And so if you want like tavern chatter, they have that.
Nice.
If you
Okay.
want
Yeah.
like a stormy night or like wind,
They have that.
and you can change all the volumes and level.
Nice. Okay. Definitely. Will.
So
I'll put a link in when you do the video. There will be a link there for that.
it's something that helped our games so much just because I mean I'm a bit of a clown, so I was not using the soundboard to make it like epic or fantastic. I'd be using the weirdest sounds at the wrong times.
Oh, okay. Well, we're a lot of hold that YouTube, pull it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's something that definitely helped. Prior to that, I believe what our DM was doing was he'd go through and he'd estimate roughly where we'd get to that day.
Okay.
And then he'd pull up all the sounds on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So then he'd
Have them set up.
preload them, yeah, so that he can just like, oh, okay, I'll play this one for this fight, and then if they make it to the inn, I've got this sound. So it's cool to see all these little gadgets come out to really like support tabletop gaming. I love to see that it's making like a serious wave.
It is. I'm a lot older than you.
Well, you don't look it.
I
So
appreciate that, but like I said, I remember when you said you're a gamer or you're into fantasy or that, you sort of got to look at
mhm,
like, oh, okay, you're like that.
right.
you know so it's been so great to see now, especially like after COVID was horrible, yes, but it did help the
Mhm,
community because people were like, I'm stuck indoors, let's reach out to other people. And then
right.
internationally you started having Discord, Roll20, all these things, people started reaching out, and
Yeah.
the hobby grew a lot,
Mhm,
which was great to see. And yeah, that's where also they started dabbling with lighting effects, music. So they're introducing movie and novel ideas as a storytelling thing into their games.
oh, absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know.
and I think it's amazing. COVID did bless us in that way
Hmm.
because the amount of people you would never imagine playing Dungeons and Dragons or painting Warhammer
Yeah.
figures
Yes.
or like it's been shell shocking because to look at me, if you met me in the real world, you would never guess that I'm like that is my
Your passion.
life. My
Yeah.
flavor is fantasy.
Yeah.
And so but for me it's always been that way.
Hmm.
The amount of people I've met like being at the gym who we start talking and something comes up, and then they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to a D&D game
Yeah,
after this," and
yeah,
like there's a part of your brain that just like
yeah. That's just it.
explodes.
Yeah, and it's like same for me at work. Sometimes I'm like, I do this and I do this. And they're like, oh, so do I. Like, do you like, do you like this one? Yes.
It's unified so many different people across so many different generations, cultures, like,
Hmm.
and that's kind of one of those things where like I think you asked me earlier like how I kind of stepped towards voice acting,
Yes.
and part of that has been my experience with D&D. And everybody, when I first really got into D&D, and I was working in a factory and I had my headbuds earbuds in, I wanted something to listen to while I was working, and people pointed out to me Critical Role,
Hmm.
and hearing Matt Mercer,
Yes.
like that man is a wizard with
Oh,
voices,
he is. He is.
and then finding out that that was something that people do as a career
Hmm.
was give life to a vast array of characters. That was like, I think it was that moment right there where I started to dream.
Okay. Nice.
So, but yeah, it's only been
Nice.
the last like 2.5 years, almost 3 years, that I've struck out and really started to like chase those
Dreams.
dreams.
Well, that's good. That's important. But also for anyone who's watching, if you're not Matt Mercer, don't worry.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
as I've said before, not everyone, no one can be a Matt Mercer. They've got a production, they've got writers, they've
yes.
got staff. As long try your best, but as long as you get a good group of people together, that's what more is
Mhm.
important. Um, so I just
Yeah, and
always I
that's
always throw that out there. It's like because I know people
that
like
that is very important to point out, is that you don't need to be a voice actor, you don't need to be
no,
a unicorn like Matt Mercer, you
yeah,
don't need to like, you can sit down and play this game, and people that have never played tabletop have sat down and played that game with me, and within by the end of the first session, they're rolling and they're having a blast
yeah,
and they're giving their character life and
hmm
details, and yeah,
yeah.
so
It's just
anybody can pick it up.
oh, exactly. It's a lot of fun, and there's a wide variety of games out there as well. To if you're more into science fiction or into
Mm-hmm.
detective work and stuff, that's what I love too. Is like if you want a genre, like I like mysteries. Well, there's games out there, tabletop games and board games out there for that.
If you guys ever set up a remote Call of Cthulhu, man,
Oh,
you
real?
let me know.
Oh,
I would.
1920s, 1920s or modern.
Oh, we've played a variety of them all the way back to the Roman era,
Okay.
and like that one was Call of Cthulhu is
Yes.
just like Lovecraft is some of the most fun I've
It's
had because
and
it's all about the narrative.
yes, and again, it's Lovecraft was so perfect for. I mean, okay, he was crazy.
Yes,
Yes.
very, very, very crazy.
But yeah, that world he created with the elder gods and everything, and for
Mm-hmm.
people who aren't aware, if this time you're still not sure what Lovecraft is, well, there's the elder gods and everything, but in the game, knowing things is not necessarily a good thing because not like in D&D, if you've learned secrets, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu, it's not necessarily a good thing.
No, no, it really isn't. There is a We were playing, I'm a Lovecraft fan, and so we're playing, and the GM, Tony the GM on Twitch, YouTube, he's brilliant. He's amazing. But we're playing, and he mentions a character. I don't know if you're familiar with, called the King in Yellow.
I'm trying to remember. No, I don't remember that one, but I'm sure.
He's one of the Cthulian pantheon,
Okay.
and basically his gimmick is you just go mad. If you wear one of his icons, you just go mad.
Oh.
So everybody at the table is kind of unfamiliar with this guy, but I know about this guy because I've read Lovecraft work
Mhm.
or work by other authors in the Lovecraft setting, and I know about this guy. And so we go into this theater house, and everyone at the door is handing out these free pendants that are yellow, and they have a crown on them. And I'm like,
Nope, nope,
nope,
nope, nope, no,
nope.
no, no, not taking it. Nope.
Sorry, I'm allergic to metal, not
Yeah,
having it.
yeah.
But I played a I played a retired Roman legionnaire who was stuck in his glory days.
Yeah.
And so every passerby or anybody that had anything to do with legions, I'd always ask, oh, did you serve in the fourth with Tiberius? And like gave this character, it was a running gimmick where this character, like he was a fanboy of this legionnaire named Tiberius.
No. Okay.
And yeah, it was some of the most fun I've had because it was more just about the gimmicky or the goofy narrative.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
and that's the thing about people to understand. Like the role playing it's the stories you build. It's like that's what you remember.
absolutely.
Because I played different versions of Call of Cthulhu and different characters, and one of the funny ones when we were first starting, the GM had misread zombies incorrectly,
Mm-hmm.
so didn't realize how tough they were because we were taking them out. And then he read the
Right.
rules properly, and the next time I was like, "Oh, we just got killed."
Oh, this is trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but one of the fun ones I had was I was playing the the 1920s. I was a like an Errol Flynn type guy. Hey, look at me.
Okay.
I do fencing. I can do this, but I'm just an actor, right? Then we were
Right.
investigating stuff, and inside this room, this evil dead thing started coming to life. So my character ran out the door and closed it behind him.
Oh,
And people are like, "What did you just do to us, dude? I'm an actor." Like,
that is
this thing's
perfect.
this thing's dead and walk. I'm out of here, and I just
Oh, that
slammed
is perfect.
it. you know, and that's just it. It's like that's the thing people get understand is like, don't take it personally in when these things happen, right? It's all part
Mm-hmm.
of the fun of the role playing,
Oh
right?
yeah, and yeah. To that note, we played games where um, somebody accidentally caused a TPK, like a total party kill,
Yeah.
and we all just kind of had to laugh it off because it was that's what you do, and then
Hmm.
you start writing up your next
Yeah,
character.
exactly. And again, that's a story you can tell. When you're sitting around going, "Remember the time when blah 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 did
Oh,
this?"
we still razz him about it. We still bring it up. He
Yeah.
gets stopped by a couple of guards and panicked, levitated off his horse, and dropped a fireball on the party. To try and he was aiming for the guards, but didn't consider we were all within the radius, and
Hmm.
it just caused a total party kill
Yeah.
because it wounded all of us
Oh yeah, and then
terribly,
and then the
and
guards,
then
the
the
rest of
guards
them came
finished
out.
us
Yeah.
all.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of like misreading fireball because again it's like radius and it's like never do it when you're in a dungeon because of
Yeah.
blowback.
Yes.
And
And if you get a DM that's hardcore, you're in trouble.
oh, that's what happened again. Same thing. Mage decided, oh, there's guys ahead. I'm going to cast a fireball, not realizing that they were at the edge of the wall. So
Mm.
it went so far, and then
Yeah,
so it
exactly.
was that the DM's explaining. It's like, so that thing in the backdraft when you're standing there and you're watching the flames go. That's what you're seeing right now. Oh.
Yeah. Tell my mom I love her.
Exactly, uh, but that's just it. Like role playing is so creative. It's a story. Like that's what storytelling really is role
Right.
playing. And I think that anyone who's had experience with role playing, you know, it's like they're a creative person somehow. They either want to be involved in either streaming or writing or
Mm.
stuff like that. Um, where was I was going somewhere with this, but I just got so distracted.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
fine. No, I've got a question for you.
sure.
I love the narrative part and the experience of being, interacting with other people
Yes.
in that tabletop game,
Hmm.
whether it's Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons, Star. What is the sci-fi one? We just played it not
Star
too long
Wars, Star
ago.
Frontiers, Star Trek.
It's a Star. But we played we played some of that, and it made me thankful that our GM was very like our DM was very aware of what players wanted out of a different experience.
Hmm.
So with some games, we liked it where he was cut and dried. The rules are the rules. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
But then there are other times where, like, when we're playing Call of Cthulhu, it's more about the narrative and like
Yes.
we want to see how the story plays out. So he never actively tried
Hmm.
to eliminate us because, as you know, if a DM wants to
Oh,
eliminate you, they will.
it's so easy. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's how important do you think it is for a DM to read what his character or what his players are wanting
It's
out of the
it's to me
campaign.
it's very important because
Yeah.
also like for me you want three. There's a reason they say 3 to 5 is the optimum for a group.
Mhm.
Because when I'm running, I try to like some people like more of the mystery, some people like the action. Like I try to get a group that's similar minded for things.
Right.
But let's because I'm running like an alien game, Alien Colonial Marines. So that's cut
Okay.
cut and dried. Like there's still some narrative, but it's pretty much you're going in, you're hunting bugs or hunting things, and that's it. Uh, but I still try to offer other people role playing things. Like so, in the downtime, here's stuff you can do. Not everyone's going to partake in it, which is fine. But I try to
Mhm.
focus on the ones that want some of that to give them some time each. And the one
Of
who is
course.
as a DM, I try not to do more than this is again why you don't want a big group, 5 to 10 minutes per person on these
Right.
situations, right? Because if you got 5 people, that's almost an hour they're waiting before things happen. If you're
Right.
doing it,
Exactly.
so that's why you try to interspace as much as possible. Couples. Okay, what are you doing in this case? Blah blah blah. Okay, I'll get back to you. Cool. What are you doing? Blah blah blah. Okay, cool. I'll get back to you. And I also I try to get the party to be interacting with each other. And that's
Mhm.
some of the best games I've had where I throw something out. What are you doing, Cole? You
Yeah.
say something. The next person's like, "Oh, Cole, well, I want to do this instead." And he's like, "Well, you guys talk. You know,
Okay.
you play your
You're
character.
getting, yeah.
You
I
guys,
think that's great where you're kind of you're bouncing the characters off of each other, the
yeah,
players off of each other.
yeah,
That's fantastic as a DM and as a player. Yeah, I had much the same experience. I've DM'd once
okay."
for a Warhammer campaign,
Okay.
and
I've done it. I'm not. I consider myself that you can put me in any situation. I can game. I can run it.
mhm,
Even if I'm not familiar with the rules, I can run something.
that is fantastic because like we wanted to play Warhammer,
Yeah.
and we didn't have a DM at the time. He was in the middle of moving across the country.
Yeah. It's a little hard then.
Yeah, so we put together a group, and I was like, you know what? I love Warhammer. I
Mhm.
love storytelling. I can do it.
Yeah.
So figured it out, and we had a blast. But it was interesting getting the DM's perspective
Yeah.
for a change, where you're like, okay, like I got to keep this story going. So I
Uh,
built. I ended up way too invested in that. I built out an entire campaign that like spanned pretty much
that's
all of the old world.
that's normal. That's normal. You.
They loved it.
Oh,
So
and also the one thing as a DM you also have to realize, it. I hate to bring up a war story, but it's the same idea. The best laid plans last until your interaction with the enemy.
yes, right, and
And when you have
that is
this, I've
very
got this long
that
thing
is
like
that is very apt with players. As soon as your best laid plans uh, are fine until interaction with your players.
yes. And then it's like, because then all of a sudden here's this unimportant NPC that you're just like, blah, blah, blah. And they focus on that one.
Mhm.
So now you're like, well, I'm lucky. Like I am a creative person. I can think on my feet quickly, which helps
Right,
when players want the backstory for someone I just had as a didn't even have a name for. And it's like, okay, yeah, so this is his story, blah, 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 blah. That's hard for a lot of DMs to do. I know that.
right.
And that's where it's one of those ones. It's just going to take experience.
Mhm.
The thing also is I tell DMs try to know the rules, but don't focus on the rules.
Right,
Right? If you're telling a narrative and you're like the rules, you're not sure of what to do in that case. Make something up. But make sure you tell your players right off the bat. Like if it comes up to something I'm not sure, I'll make it up. We'll deal with it later on of how to retro explain it in the rules. But if
right.
it's going on, don't stop me and say, well, according to page blah 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 blah, because that just slows everyone down. It takes you out of the story and everything.
It pulls you out for sure.
It's same as if you're watching a movie and all of a sudden you get this thing where you're like, well, that makes no sense, right? So your sense
Mhm.
of suspension of disbelief is gone, right? So same thing when you're running a game. I tell the players, I'll make stuff up sometimes if I'm not sure if it fits the story, and I always tell them I'm never going to try and screw you over, right?
Right,
If you want to try something that's really stupid, I'll let you do it. If you fail, be aware of consequences, though.
right.
You know, but I'm not going to say, "Oh, you can't do that." Like you can.
I think that's important. I think that's definitely important to have that mentality. That's one thing. Again, I keep I keep bragging about our DM, but that is one thing he's exceptional at. Is if I can explain to him the justification for why I think this works, he'll. It doesn't matter if there are rules against it.
No,
If I've given a solid reason for why I think my dwarf should be able to leap this canyon, then okay, yeah, you're right.
yeah,
Sure, you
it,
can try it.
exactly. You can probably still fail, but give
Mm-hmm.
it a shot. And this is where there's different games because in um, D&D has now the fifth edition advantages or disadvantages and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's other games where like Savage Worlds are the ones where you get bennies or you get bonus things to help you out for things,
Mm,
right? Like if you describe it really well and you're playing your character really well, you'll get benefits that can help you in certain situations in the combat or other stuff, right?
right.
So it's like,
Yeah, and so we used kind of like that. We used I created like a renown system and a fate system
yeah,
for not the fate system.
no, I
I should specify, but a fate system and a renown system that the players accumulated points in. And the fate system was basically they had an opportunity to change their fate.
mm,
And so it would be one dice roll that they would earn per special encounter.
okay, yeah,
And then later they could re-roll if they had to. They could use a point to re-roll.
that makes sense.
With the renown, it was the higher your renown got, that was basically your persuasion check.
Oh, because people know who you are and like that help.
Yeah. So if you became famous or infamous, then like that would basically decide what a person was willing to tell you or talk to you or assist you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting. I like little systems like that
Yeah,
that really help.
I had one where it's called Deadlands was based on the Savage Worlds ones, and I gave them like for every big story you have a plot point,
Right.
and it's like a plot point is you can rewrite the plot, right?
Yeah.
Up to a certain point, but it's basically
Mhm.
it's like per not per session, but it's like here's an adventure. It's going to take 3 to 4 sessions to go through. You have one plot point to rewrite the story, you know, and
Yeah, I like campaigns where you could go back and potentially experience a different story
mhm,
or a different outcome at the
yeah.
end.
And it's like this is like okay, well, the bad guys here, you're stuck, you're all dead. You can use it to say, an NPC shows up or a cave in happens to save you. But it's one of those ones like, okay, if you're really, really stuck, I'll give you an out so I don't do a TPK.
Right.
You know?
You are a generous god because some
Oh, it's
DMs
just like you're dead. That's it. Yeah.
they're like, you better have your next character written
Yeah.
because you're done.
Yeah. Because see, I like to work with the play. Like that's the other thing too is even from Critical Role, what you get is interaction with the players to it's a cooperative storytelling. Yes, the DM has he's got the story worked out of how things are going to be or the module, but it's supposed to be cooperative between you and the players to have
Yeah.
have a fun time and work the story out together to end up with a result that everyone can look back and go, that was a great time.
Yeah, and like it's I think that's the biggest like that's one of the things that like one of my favorite takeaways from any D&D game that we've played or any tabletop game we've played is being able to look back and like pardon my language shoot the shit
Oh no,
about like
we're
a
not we're
different
not we're not kid friendly, so no worries.
okay, all right. So yeah, one of my favorite things is definitely shooting the shit about different encounters that we had
Yes.
or how things turned out. And people laugh at me because I failed catching a flask that somebody threw to me at the top of the stairs, and it was a critical fail, and I ended up falling down 1,000 stairs. And like, yeah, my character was in rough shape.
Oh yeah, so you did the John Wick thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and I also, or another time that I still get razzed about is the party monk. We're fighting I believe it was a Hydra out in this water, and there was a busted up ship, and the monk was using the pieces of ship to jump out, like he was full sprint
Oh,
and jumped
yep,
out.
yep.
And did attacks on the Hydra. And so I'm thinking, like, if I can land this, this will be sweet. But I'm playing a Dwarven Ranger. And
Yeah, you
so
don't have the same sort of abilities as the monk. No.
so I start rolling and I'm doing my acrobatics and all the checks. And he hits the first piece of Flotsam and just sinks like a rock.
Look at me. Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I still get flamed about that one. That was a good time.
Well, I think that's something else that players have to realize when they're starting off. Failure is okay.
Oh
Failure,
yeah, it's part of the narrative.
it's part of the narrative. Do not like. This is where it's like they say there's people that fudge their dice and stuff, and it's like no. Failure can be good stories
Mm-hmm.
and can also, if you have a good GM, a failure can lead to more interesting things. I was
Well, I
running
mean, if you think about it, you read a book, characters fail all the
all the
time in
time.
books
Exactly. Yes.
or
Well,
in film.
the good characters,
Yes, yes, that's true.
the interesting characters. The other ones are
I'm
like
looking at you, Steven Seagal.
yes. Because I was running one that was based on the Pendragon game. Anyways, they're Roman legionnaires and all sorts of combination.
Hmm.
They're off to fight a dragon, and one guy's like, I got a magic spear I got and stuff, so I'm gonna jump in and just stab it in the head. He fumbled, so I'm like, okay, so you fall into the mouth instead.
Right,
But then he still managed to use a spear to do damage. But it led to a great story instead of just like, okay, you get killed. It's like, no,
right,
since you're jumping for his head, he turns, opens his mouth, and you fall into it.
right.
You know,
And that's part of the story.
yeah, exactly. And then that's the story we talk about now and then. I'm going to tie this into movies if you don't mind, because
Absolutely.
I was going to say because that's when you're sitting around having a good story to tell. You can also tell when movies are done when everyone's having a good time making it. Right?
Oh yeah.
There's a difference when you're watching a movie when you can tell there's tension between other people or not everything's
Mm,
working, and then you watch a movie where it may not be the best movie, but they're all having fun together. And you can just
right.
tell that yes, they were just enjoying themselves. They don't care what the movie's about or the story. They're just having fun, and that flows through the movie. And you're just like, you enjoy it more because you're like, yes, I'm part of them now.
Yeah, and that ends definitely that definitely adds to well to what you said. It shows through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at The Last of Us, just like anything else, people will be critical of what they change or don't change. But there's one thing you can't argue with in that movie, or sorry, that television series. It's clear how much passion people had for that
Yes.
project.
Yes.
And being on the set, you would think, okay, we're dealing with stuntmen, we're dealing with vehicles, we're dealing with 400 extras, we've got 50 crew or 100 crew. I'm not sure the crew count for that night. We've got so much to organize and so much to do. You would expect it to be tense.
Mm-hmm.
Man, there was nothing but smiles
Oh, that's
that
nice.
whole night. And like the thing is, I'm sure there were moments where they're like, okay, did we get the shot? Or like, I'm sure that the ADs and the crew were not happy trying to get 400 people to calm down
Mm-hmm.
between takes because, they would tell us like, cheer and yell and like you guys are gonna be yelling like fuck Fedra and you guys are like they wanted it, the actual energy
Mm-hmm.
to translate through. The thing is people got so hyped that you'd see ADs running around going cut, 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 and no one's stopping.
You're up
So
here. We need you down here.
exactly.
Like,
But that's kind of the interesting part is that people, you would expect that to be chaos, but it wasn't.
yeah.
It was a lot of smiling, a lot of laughing, a lot of cheering. Like when we wrapped that scene, it was probably the loudest it's ever been. Like so there have been sets where where there's been tension.
Yeah.
But it's usually towards the end. The last day on a different show that I worked on was very, very, very like it was tense because we were at the end of like a 16-hour day. It was the final day,
Yeah.
but and it was an intense scene. So it didn't like it still translated well when the show aired. But you could tell that people were definitely
Reached their limit.
that people had tapped out. People
Yeah.
were ready to call it. But the second we wrapped, everybody was smiles and everybody was celebratory. So it still worked out.
So I guess now, because you have appreciation for when you hear the stories of like, okay, the actors had this issue together and there was tense, and like, you can sort of see
Hmm.
like after 7 years of working together, there's going to be some conflict
There's
sometimes.
yeah, there's going to be different relations that have built over the course of like with any show,
Hmm.
for example, or even you take an epic like Lord of the Rings that filmed over what like 6 years,
Yeah, I think
8 years.
yeah,
It was a pretty long period.
yeah,
You're going to have different relationships develop between different cast members, and different crew members. So working on shows like The Last of Us, I'm sure that's something that they'll experience.
hmm
I'm positive Game of Thrones had that.
yeah, but yeah.
There was characters we heard about, the actors and actresses refused to be on scene
Mhm.
together.
Yeah,
So that's kind of just bound to happen.
well, that's just it. Like you're stuck working 12, 16 hours a day with the same person for like a long time.
Mhm.
And I've read stories where they're like, yeah, we didn't like each other here, but now we're friends because we're no longer working together and we're no longer having to go through all that tense stuff. Um,
Right.
I was just gonna say for the when you're talking about the last day, the last 16 hours, the last day reminds me of Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, where they filmed it in reverse, like they did the shots in reverse. So because when Bill
Mhm.
Murray came in, he was in more a happy mood. So they filmed those scenes at the end first, because they knew by the time it was getting near filming, he'd be a bitter, angry person. So they filmed the beginning
That is
scenes at the
fantastic.
end.
I did not know that. That
Yeah,
is fantastic. But
that
it is interesting because not all of the time, but I do know I've heard that it is frequent, and I've been there for a couple different sets where they filmed a lot of the movie in
mhm,
reverse.
yeah.
So it is interesting that they do that. That is fantastic though
But that
with
was the whole
Groundhog
because
Day.
yeah, Ivan Reitman he knew it was like okay, Bill Murray's gonna be pissed off near the end, so we'll film those scenes at the end because it'll be perfect, and when he first comes in, we'll see the the end scenes where he's happier.
That's what's funny about that is I never do that, but I've seen that movie quite a few times. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
That's a good strategy for filming.
yeah. And again, it's also when you helps you when you know your crew, cast and crew, right? Like
Right.
that's it. When you develop a relationship with them over several years, you're like, okay, Cole likes this, so when he comes on set, we're gonna have this is how
Yeah,
we're gonna do it.
exactly.
Because I'm hoping eventually
So
you'll be able to get to that point where you'll be able to,
I mean I've worked commercials where it was a very intimate commercial where there's only a few of us on set that day,
yeah,
and you definitely people do get to know you in that way.
yeah.
So it's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask you about that. Has there been scenes where like, are you married or is your girlfriend?
I have a girlfriend. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. How would you feel if you had to do certain scenes where there's like, more intimate reaction with another,
So it's funny. A lot of people don't know this, but this goes back to what I was saying about cast and crew and everybody being like absolute professionals.
yeah.
There is, and I've explained this to her, and we've talked about this, me and other actors, and people have talked about this, and I've been asked this before. There is nothing intimate, feeling intimate about filming an intimate scene, right? Because
There's
you've
camera
got your two
lights.
characters,
Yeah.
you've got your two characters, right? And that's all you see as the viewer.
Yeah.
What you don't see is that the camera is right here, like beside the person's face. So it as the actor or actress, it's you and one person standing this close,
Yeah.
and then there's a camera that feels like it's right here. It's not, but it feels like
It,
it's right here. And 40 people. And there's a sound boom mic,
over top. Yeah.
like literally between your foreheads almost.
And hot lights as well, I imagine.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So like and as far as like um anything like that, or anything where there's a term for it, but like sex scenes obviously are not actual sex scenes.
Yes.
Um, there's simulated sex scenes is what it's called, I believe. You always have most sets, if they're good sets or professional sets, will have an intimacy coordinator.
Hmm.
So if there's nudity or if there's anything of that nature, of a revealing nature or an intimate nature, their job is to make sure that everyone is acting professionally, that it is a closed set, making sure that everybody feels safe and comfortable on set. Um, yeah, so it's not, it's never just two people having an intimate moment. There's like protocols and there's like, yeah, like you said, there's big spot lamps and there's like a person coming over and putting a light beacon on your face to make sure that like the light is good. So,
that gets the mood going right there. Eh?
oh yeah, fantastic. Yeah, never mind the 30 sets of eyes that are like looking at the screens and like someone's like, yeah, okay, bring that angle in closer and
Yeah.
like get the mic closer and it's
Yeah.
like somebody's got to be rolling.
Do it again. Do it
Yeah,
again.
yeah. So there's nothing like there's nothing intimate about intimacy on
Yeah.
set.
I have a. You don't have to answer this one, but it's a
Mhm.
when we develop. Because have you been on a set with guns and stuff like that for safety
Yes.
protocols? Yes.
Yes.
So you have an idea now which one I'm going to ask you about. The Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin.
Yes.
Yes.
Because like again, I've heard some different things, and I just want your opinion more. I'm not,
Yeah, we've all talked about it. It's a pretty public situation that happened. Super devastating, super
Yes.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Both for Alec Baldwin and for people that were injured / person that lost their life. I mean,
it just I've been hearing stuff like they're saying more and more that there were signs that the set wasn't that safe, like from almost
oh
the
yeah,
get go.
no. There's a so my experience. I can't speak to what happened there.
Yes.
But my experience was that weapons on set that are live or hot, um, typically whenever they can get away with it, you'll be using a rubber weapon.
Yes.
Or airsoft
prop,
even.
Yeah, the prop thing. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, airsoft is used as a prop weapon.
Yeah.
In situations where there is a hot weapon on set, it travels through as few hands as possible, and there's always accountability. There was a scene for another show we did where, and even The Last of Us had plenty of firearms.
Yeah.
Where the weapons master, or forgive me, I'm not positive on their title, the person that is in control of all the weapons and safety, checks the rounds that are being used. If there aren't rounds being used, they go over all of that stuff with whoever is going to be handling a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, even the scene that we filmed for The Last of Us, it looks like we're all packed in there and there are guns going off above our heads. Those guns aren't like there is a small radius around that individual that's using that gun, even if it doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Where that person has been they're taught and trained and educated on operating that weapon safely. Then, with a different set where there wasn't actually a round in the gun, they would break open the shotgun, make sure that the weapon master had checked it visually, then they'd show it to the actress. She'd check it visually. They'd both agree that it was good to go. Then he'd snap it shut and it wouldn't leave her hands until they were done that scene. There was no opening it, there was no chambering, there was no nothing.
Yeah.
So on sets where firearms are present, it should be handled with absolute respect.
And also like I know because Brandon Lee years ago unfortunately died to
yes.
And again like there was also an actor who was in the Bonnie Tyler I Need a Hero one.
Mm-hmm.
He put a prop gun in, but like blanks still have something in them, right?
Yeah, they do. So
there's a wad in there.
Yes, and so now I believe what they're doing. Don't quote me on this, but my understanding is that with certain films where like there are going to be firearms in close quarters, if they can't manage it's easier if you can get everything to work mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is with I think John Wick actually, some of those fight scenes where he's like rolling and he's doing jujitsu, and then he like uses his gun as part of the jujitsu and then discharges it into somebody. They're using a certain, like a very special type of
Right.
cap
Yeah.
that only has like enough black powder to get the weapon to cycle.
Yes, to make the noise and just yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I was read that as well. It's like yeah, it doesn't actually project. There's no projectile or anything. It's just enough to say that it's
Yeah.
making a sound. The gun's chambering, so you see. Yeah.
So I believe it's super unfortunate that any of these tragedies have had to happen, such as Brennan Lee or the Alec Baldwin incident.
Hmm.
But I think if there's one good thing that's come out of those is that every time one of those happens, the level of safety and strictness on set climbs
Well,
even higher.
see, this is also where I've seen people make fun of bad CGI in movies where there's gunfights, and it's like you see, and they're like, "Oh, look how stupid that is!" Like, yeah, but you do realize that they're trying to be safe. Like, I have an understanding now that with the guns, they're dangerous. So if you're just having a
Mhm.
prop gun and you're deciding I'm going to add the effects in afterwards, I have no problem with that because that means you don't have to worry about a weapons master. You're just using a prop gun all the way through. That means you're
Yeah.
not have you part of that is also safety for your crew because you're not if you're on a very tight budget, you may not be able to afford
Mhm.
the proper people, the proper training. So it makes more sense just use a prop gun and fix it in post. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, if they can get away with it, I feel that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah.
I mean, now you can get airsoft guns
Hmm.
that have a motor in them to replicate recoil
Yes.
and cycling. So there's no it's becoming less and less of an actual need to have live weapons on set,
Hmm.
which is great. That's fantastic.
Yes.
And I mean, host on shows like The Walking Dead, they do a fantastic job because I 90% of that I would say is probably done in post, so
Yeah.
it's all animation. Um, the trick is not everyone is going to notice these things, but if you are familiar with firearms, then it can really pull you out of the moment, like we
Yes.
talked about earlier, where you're like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There was a scene, this sticks with me because it was a bit of a trigger. Um, there is a scene where a man is using a Tapco SKS, which is basically it's a modernized Russian SKS,
Okay.
and that is a semi-automatic weapon.
Hmm.
You can fire it very quickly, but I believe that the max capacity on those is 20, unless they have created a magazine that holds 30. But it's not a fully automatic weapon.
Hmm.
Part of the only issue you have with going into post and fixing up weapons is they fixed it up to make it look like he was firing this thing like a machine gun.
Oh, yeah. That's no.
So you got to be careful with that, obviously. That is the trade off to not using a live firearm.
Hmm.
But I think if you're conscious of things like that
Well,
and you have an advisor on your team, if you can afford it.
that's one thing I've found for a lot of movies is your gun doesn't have that many bullets. Like
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
I mean it's a trope, right? It's one of those ones like how many bullets does your six shooter have? 30? Okay.
Right. It's like if you watch any movie where they're using like the old M16, like the I don't know if it's Vietnam era, but
Yeah.
they had just the tiny little baby
Oh yeah.
magazine
Yeah. It was very
that
small.
carried 10 rounds.
Yep.
Or maybe it carried 15. I don't want somebody to come after me because I said it carried.
But yeah, it was
definitely
definitely under 20. It was
right.
definitely.
And you'd have a guy standing there in the bush just hosing with this thing.
Hmm. Well,
and you're like, okay, he's got like a 60 round capacity out of that.
yeah. And the other
So-
one I have is like the silencers as well in most movies.
Mhm.
Because it's like, okay, silencers. You may understand what the term silencer means. It's not making it a quiet gun. It just
Right.
reduces the
Yeah.
noise.
It's more aptly it is a reducer.
If you're outside yes, that's more likely you won't notice a silent shot. And that's what they're designed for, to be outside, because, it's
Yeah, at a distance,
at a
you
distance, you're not going to really notice it.
right.
Inside a building, you're still going to hear it.
Oh yeah, and that's why there's like there's always the spat between clips and magazines,
Yes.
and then there's the spat between silencers and suppressors.
Hmm.
With silencer and the term silencer and suppression, I think that's just like a evolution
Yeah.
where yeah, it is suppressing the sound.
But yeah, but that's it.
So
It's not, yeah, it's not a silent, it's a
it's not
suppression.
muting it.
And the other one, my buddies and I always laugh, is the Hollywood grenades that are like the massive fireball.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
wow, that's one hell of a grenade you just threw there.
yeah. Like even high explosive grenades, like fragmentation, you're gonna get a lot of dust and
But
like a pop of like almost smoke,
yeah, well, because
but
it's not
that's it.
fire. It's
Right,
designed to send shrapnel flying through the air. Like
right.
that's what a fragmentation frags. It's no fire. There's nothing. It's not gonna blow stuff up.
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, I don't, and I'm not 100%. Like, I'm not an explosive expert by any means, but to my knowledge, even like an HE grenade, like a high explosive grenade,
It
doesn't have like a lot of fire.
no.
It's the shock, like the blast,
Yes.
that actually does damage.
But that's what they're designed for. But yeah, it's just those are the movies I sort of like. It depends on the movie. Like I tell people, I can laugh at B movies, and overlook
Mm,
things because I know they have lower production and stuff like that, and I'm just
right.
going with the flow. But more like I had some issues with the Matt Damon movies, the series
Born.
Born Identity, because it's
Yeah.
supposed to be something spy in modern times, and you're like, okay,
Hmm.
well, can you at least do research? Because I mean, okay, back in the day, it was hard to do research. You had to go
Right.
to libraries and check. Now you've got the internet. What is the
Hmm.
recoil of this weapon? What is the capacity for this? It's easy to have a researcher do Google search, but you
Well,
know,
I think now we're coming into a stage where, like, yes, first of all, let me say, completely agree with you. I feel like a little bit of research goes a long ways, and it can put your viewer more in the moment.
mhm.
But then I feel like now we're coming more into um, an area with action movies, for example, where people like realism a lot more.
Mhm.
I think that's why Fast and the Furious is getting more and more laughs
It's just so silly.
because it's going the opposite
Yeah,
direction.
a car in space.
Right. Yeah, so exactly. We've all heard those jokes, and that's kind of the thing. Like that's almost why that's getting more laughs, is they're going the polar
Yeah,
opposite
they're
direction.
like screw reality, screw physics, screw gravity.
Yeah, what is science? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing is like if you look at our action genre now, it is going more the direction of now, obviously, do they use unnecessary explosions sometimes for the
Yes.
cinematography, for the entertainment value?
Yeah.
Yes. But we are going more in the direction of we are going more in the direction of like John Wick
Hmm.
and what is it, 13 Hours, Secret
Yes.
War?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
movies like that where it's down to earth,
I,
gritty.
I was gonna say I think the raid and influence from the Korean movies and stuff had a big influence on those movies
Mhm.
because you look at it and you're like, okay, it's gritty, it's brutal, but it's somewhat you can believe it, right? Like,
Right, and
I
so
mean,
that's the thing is I guess I should specify: are there things that are out there in John Wick?
oh yes,
Yes. I'm not saying that's like, oh, this is a hyper realistic movie.
no, no,
But if you
but
take elements that like the firearms
mhm,
practice in that movie, or if you take elements like any of his martial arts,
mhm,
it's well known that he has practice. He put time in.
mhm,
And with firearms, he put time in with
yes,
Terran. I think it was Terran Tactical.
yeah. Well, that's
And
the thing.
so,
Like 6 months of training, like,
right. So this is a man that actually knows how to operate these
mhm,
weapons and knows how to use this martial arts.
yeah, and that's where
So,
it shows like when we're doing the way he's doing the reloading the guns and stuff like that.
mhm,
Like I can't do that, but it shows he knows exactly what he's doing when he's doing that. He's actually trained enough that he's almost a reflex now. And
So his snap reloading and like quick like combat reloading and even his movement with the guns looks so natural.
and I think that helps you keep the immersed in the movie, right?
Hmm.
And you're probably also not a fan of the quick ed cuts, like
Yeah, no.
the Taken movies. The for me is also the superhero Marvel movies. It's like
Mhm.
I want if I'm watching a fight, I want to be able to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, Taken was something. The first Taken movie was interesting because it was a cool concept,
Hmm.
and like the story itself, cool concept. Liam Neeson, love that guy.
Yeah.
He's always got an entertainment value to him
Hmm.
because his person is just interesting to watch.
Hmm.
He's a relatively good actor.
Yes.
That said, that said, he is a man who, bless his heart, needs to stop taking my person's been kidnapped or killed and this is revenge.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that is the editing in those movies and
Oh
the action sequences in those movies, I can't I can't abide. I
no.
can't watch over and over
No,
again.
it because you can't focus on what's happening. It's just too many quick edits in a short amount of time. You're like, I mean, it works sometimes in some cases when you're trying to show you know um, the chaos that is happening in a fight.
Hmm. Yeah, like the Wakanda fight in the Avengers.
Yes.
Okay, we're flipping character to character to character because you want to give the impression that it's nuts, it's chaos,
Yes.
and all these little individual scraps are happening at the same time. Totally get that. Totally appreciate that.
Hmm.
But yeah, then there are other movies where like my oh my, one of my favorite fight scenes actually out of any of the Marvel movies was Bucky Barnes and Captain America,
Yes.
Winter Soldier,
Yeah.
their knife fight where it's
Yes.
a constant following pan
Hmm.
during that one exchange.
Yes.
Anytime a director can do that and do it well, oh,
Yeah.
it's so good.
And I
Like,
mean, I know it takes longer for the choreography in that, which sometimes
mhm.
makes movies are like, well, we don't have the time to do that. But I'm like, do you also have time to do 60 edits in 1 minute?
Right, yeah, and so that's the thing is like it's interesting that you say that because like the choreography is probably like well, it's not probably it is difficult.
Hmm.
I mean, even working as an extra, Lord, there were scenes where like they'd set us up, and it was only like 10 or 12 of us that were being set up in a scene, and they wanted to make it look like a house was being raided, and so to set up what is literally going to be, I want to say inside 60 seconds,
Yeah.
probably takes like an hour for them to stage everybody. Never mind the camera and getting the crew on site and like getting everybody set up in the house, but staging everybody and getting everybody into wardrobe and once you're actually on, then doing all of the takes. Like for this one little ditty of a scene was like 3 or 4 hours.
Jeez, yeah. Yeah.
So choreography in a fight scene where they do that, where the camera pans along two guys fighting, like man, oh man,
Yeah.
like
It's well, the big one is Daredevil for the TV series with
mm,
the hallway fights where it's like one
yes,
long take, and again, you're talking they took days to get that prepared, and
right.
and so I understand when they're like, okay, we don't have time to do that or it's too much work, but if you do it properly, the payoff is so much better for the audience.
Oh, absolutely. There's one of my favorite things to do is with certain movies. If I get the vibe right off the get-go that they're trying to do exactly that, then I like to see how long it is actually between camera
Hmm.
swaps. So there was a movie with Chris Hemsworth called Extraction.
Oh yes, I love that movie.
Man, like literally, there's a point where it's got to be like a solid 3 minutes without a camera change,
Yeah.
without an edit, without like where it's lit, and I'm sure there's editing involved in there,
But you can't
but
tell.
it's one camera
Yeah.
following, and like they did so many of those throughout that movie, and it keeps you sucked in
Hmm.
because I think of it kind of like commercial breaks, where like if you're breaking and editing too much, it's very easy for me to be like,
I'll
oh,
flip.
this person's story, and then it's like they change the channel on you, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I'm back to looking at my phone,
Hmm.
right? So
So yeah, that's where I fear.
it's
Yeah,
interesting.
I agree with you because I saw the movie and the same thing. It's like it's so much more engaging than any of the other. Like I hate Marvel. Like I like Marvel, but
Hmm.
the fight scenes, except for a few exceptions, you're just like I have no interest. It's same as. Do you ever see Aquaman?
Yes.
The last big fight, I was just so
Hmm.
bored out of my mind because I'm like I have no idea who these are. I don't care. It's too over the top, too stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's definitely that movie had its moments, but again, part of that was being carried by Jason Momoa.
yeah.
That's another dude that is very charismatic on
Oh,
screen.
yes.
Um, so I completely agree with that. It's very Aquaman was a tough one because yeah, like I understand them wanting to make their own, like they wanted to build their own franchise
Hmm.
out of that, or their own series of movies out of that. But I feel like you can get away with doing that with Batman to an extent, Superman to an extent. There are several DC characters that you can do that with, but I feel like as much as they wanted to give him the value that he deserved, uh, Aquaman should have done a couple Justice League movies first,
Yes.
and then we would have been more invested.
I think I agree. Yeah.
I was just invested in Jason Momoa. Ooh,
Yes. Yes.
like,
Well, yeah, but again, you need more than just one actor to carry your thing, right? Like
right.
that's just it.
And so that's the thing is like, and they had, don't get me wrong, they had a good cast for that movie, but I'd say like a solid 70% of the scenes in that movie that had him in them,
Mhm.
he carried it.
Oh yes. Before we go, cool. Thank you very
Mhm.
much for this. What's the one movie? I know people always ask, but what is the one movie that you could say I'll sit down and watch anytime with anybody anywhere? Or if you
Um,
have five, that's okay too. We'll accept
oh, okay, well that's good because I was gonna say that's tough for me. Um, Another hot take: The Hobbit extended editions and Lord of the Rings extended editions. You ever come out to Alberta? We could do a bender. Yep.
I can't do the Hobbits. Sorry.
I get it. No, I get it. Some people, it's there is definitely there's a tragedy that happened there,
Mm.
but the reason I think I enjoy that is just because my daughter does.
Oh, okay. Well,
So
that's okay. That's the bigger reason.
she she enjoyed it, and that's kind of where we connected in the fantasy world.
Okay,
So,
that's okay then, and that makes
but it would be
sense.
that or the 13th Warrior.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one I could sit down and watch anywhere, anytime. It's just a very well done movie.
Yeah, and then you're right. That those are the ones you're like, they as long as they'll stand the test of time,
Mhm.
just because of the actor, the writing, and everything behind it. And you must have like you said, a huge appreciation now as being behind, as an extra, seeing it all being done.
If it's definitely it's yeah, that's a bucket list for me is to work on. I don't care if it's just as an extra. I I make me mop floors on set. I don't care. I want to work on something as epic as Lord of the Rings or the I
Dune
guess
or
season of Game of Thrones, Dune. Oh
yes,
my lord, put me on something like that. I don't need to be on camera. I don't care if you pay me $16 an hour
yeah, just let me
to
be there.
mop floors. I want to stand on one of those sets for one of those days
Just
because the amount of appreciation I have for every part of the process now, it's out of this world. But thank you very much for your time today. It's been
well,
a pleasure.
no problem. Thank you very much, Cole, joining us at Out of the Basement with Pat's Chats, and all the best for you in the future with your acting and voice acting. And
Thank you very much.
thank you for everyone watching. All the information that Cole's most of the information, if I can get it down, will be in our links below. And keep an eye out for Cole.